All right, folks, I want to just kind of give you this first part of the lecture today on the circulatory system. We've already covered the immune system pretty in depth. We took a mini test on that, and now we're going to start the second body system, which again is the circulatory system. So we'll eventually have a mini test over this, most likely next week. Again, we'll get more to that um, kind of next week. I'll let you know exactly what day we're gonna cover that. So anyway, when it comes to the circulatory system, I can bring up my PowerPoint here. Go ahead and you just follow along with your note sheet there, and you can just kind of take these notes as you go. But I mean, obviously, when we think of the circulatory system, we should probably think about the heart, blood vessels, blood. So today we're just going to kind of focus on kind of what the circulatory system does, what its importance is, and we'll talk about some of the components of it. But eventually, we're going to get into all the different parts of the heart and how the heart functions. So, one of the things about circulation is, we know that our blood carries different things to all of our body cells, but first we have to capture those things from our environment. Like for example, oxygen, right? Oxygen is something that we have to, capture from our environment, and then that oxygen has to be transported to all the different cells of our body. Another thing that we have to capture from our environment is food, right? We have to, we have to get food, water, vitamins. All of those things have to get transferred to all the different parts of our body, and that's what our digestive, or I should say, our circulatory system does. Again, it transports all of those things to every single one of your body cells. So, that's just kind of one of the functions, though. I mean, as we're kind of going through this list here, you'll see that there's several different things that your circulatory system is responsible for. One of them is transporting oxygen, right? Every single cell in your body requires oxygen gas, so that's a pretty important thing that has to get carried by your blood. Another one is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a waste product that's produced by all your body cells. So, I mean, let's just say, for example, the cells in your big toe, I mean, those cells need oxygen, but they're also going to produce carbon dioxide, right? Because all the cells in our body undergo cellular respiration. We've talked about that before. Right? Our cells aren't photosynthesizing. Our cells are what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Respirating. Sorry. So they undergo cellular respiration. So that means they require oxygen, and they produce CO2 gas, which again has to be given off and has to be carried eventually out of our body. Transports food. So when you eat, let's say, a cheeseburger, your digestive system is what breaks that cheeseburger down, right, into all of its components, right, whether it be carbohydrate molecules or proteins, amino acids, lipids, vitamins. There's a whole bunch of things in that cheeseburger. So when your digestive system breaks all that down for you, then your blood, your circulatory system is going to have to carry and transport all of those things to again to all your body cells. Your immune system transports hormones. We talked about that, in the last unit. For example, things like histamine. It's a hormone that has to get carried from one point in your body to another point in your body. There's dozens of examples of hormones that your body transfers. Maintains body temperature. Not only does your blood carry a whole bunch of different things, but another thing that it does is it has to make sure that it distributes heat, evenly to all the areas of your body. And if your body doesn't have heat, it's not going to function properly. So that's an important thing as well. Finally, and we talked about this in the last unit, that your bloodstream, does help fight immunity, right? There's white blood cells. We talked, in the immune system chapter about all the different types of white blood cells and how they fight diseases and antibodies and antigens and all that type of stuff. So without a circulatory system to transport those white blood cells, then your immune system wouldn't function very well. So again, there's several different functions here of our circulatory system. Now, one of the major components of the circulatory system is your blood. Your blood is like the thing, right? It's what is transporting all of these different components. Now, when it comes to blood, there's different parts of your blood. So we're going to kind of break it down by component. Blood consists of something called plasma, red blood cells, which you're probably already aware of, maybe of what they do. We'll talk about it. White blood cells, we should know that. I'm not going to go in depth into this one today because we had a whole unit about white blood cells and immunity, right? These are the things that help protect you from pathogens and any type of infection. Then finally, something called platelets. So we're going to talk a little bit today about these three here: plasma, red blood cells, and platelets. But do understand white blood cells are a major component of your blood as well. Now, when it comes to plasma, the plasma is the liquid part of your blood. It's what makes your blood a liquid. We have cells, like white blood cells, red blood cells, etc. Those are solids. Those are things that are kind of floating in your plasma. You might remember the word suspension, back when we did our biochemistry unit. Blood is a suspension. There are things that are kind of floating in that liquid, but the liquid part is your plasma. And plasma mainly consists of water. It's about 90% water, but it also consists of a lot of other things that, basically that your blood is transporting besides oxygen. Things like amino acids and glucose and hormones and vitamins and all this type of stuff. All of those types of things would be in your plasma. All right. So, these two pictures that you see here, the one on the left, let's say, for example, they take a sample of your blood. So that test tube on the left is the blood that comes out of your arm or wherever they take it from. And then what they do is they put it into a centrifuge, which will spin it around like super fast. And when they do that, the components of your blood will actually separate, basically according to densities, and that plasma will kind of float on top of the rest of the cellular structures of your blood. So again, there's the plasma. It's kind of almost like a clearish looking liquid. Okay. Now, red blood cells, we probably have some idea what they do. Again, we've talked about them a couple times this year. But your red blood cells are also known as erythrocytes. It's kind of the fancy scientific word for them. But red blood cells contain a protein called hemoglobin. It's a protein. We call it an iron-containing protein because it does contain iron in it, which is one big reason why we have to have iron in our diets. Green vegetables, for example, are really high in iron. So is red meat. So those things are fairly important to our diet. We don't want to have too much red meat because it does contain a lot of cholesterol as well. But we need iron because iron helps us make hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is an important protein that's found in your red blood cells. Hemoglobin is what carries oxygen. So your red blood cells, I mean, really their whole purpose is to carry oxygen to all your body cells. They also carry carbon dioxide away from your body cells. There's a term here called anemia. Anemia, we've talked about sickle cell anemia before, but anemia is just a condition where your body is struggling to carry oxygen gas. So if it's struggling to carry oxygen gas, there could be a couple different reasons for that. It could be a genetic thing like sickle cell, right? We've talked about sickle cell anemia. The red blood cells are misshapen. Again, that's due to genetics, so they can't do their jobs very well. But it could be poor diet. I mean, maybe you don't have enough iron in your diet to make hemoglobin. Pregnant women typically suffer a lot from anemia. That's because a lot of their iron in their blood actually is being passed on to their baby. That's part of it. So they have to sometimes take iron supplements and things like that so that they have enough iron in their blood to make their hemoglobin. But there could be several reasons for that. But again, red blood cells basically function to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. Platelets. Platelets, the scientific name, they're called thrombocytes. Thrombocytes or platelets are made in your bone marrow, which is kind of deep inside of some of the major bones in your body, like your femur and things like that. But platelets, their whole job basically is to help your blood clot. So for example, let's say here we have a damaged blood vessel, right? And that blood vessel is broken for whatever reasons. You get a paper cut or whatever. When you cut yourself, that obviously that blood is going to flow out of the vessel. But it's the platelets' job, it's the thrombocytes' job to actually kind of seal up that wound, so that the blood will stop flowing out. Now, what they do is they create a protein. It's called fibrin. There's a couple steps to the process. We won't worry about that too much, but just know that fibrin is basically a protein that's produced by platelets to help kind of seal up that wound. We call that a clot, and that will, kind of cause the blood to not escape, that particular blood vessel, which is a good thing. There is a genetic condition that we've talked about before called hemophilia, which is again it's a genetic disorder that, for whatever reason, there's something there's a mutation to a piece of DNA, to a gene that does not allow those people to clot blood. They're having difficulty producing fibrin, producing that protein, because they don't have the genetic code, or their instructions are mutated for some reason. So again, that's a genetic condition that is caused by that. Here's a bigger picture here of some fibrin strands, showing you a blood clot. Finally, today, I just want to go through the different types of blood vessels with you. You're probably familiar with things like arteries, veins, and maybe even the third one called capillaries. On the next slide, there's a picture of these things. But just to kind of give you a brief synopsis of the differences between arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries typically carry your blood away from the heart. We'll talk tomorrow or the next time I see you about how your heart functions. But arteries are carrying blood away. Usually, that blood is oxygen rich. Usually, there is an exception. We'll talk about it when I get into the heart. But for the most part, that blood is oxygen rich, so it has a high oxygen content. Typically, inside of an artery, there's high amounts of pressure. All right, we'll talk about blood pressure down the road as well, but the pressure inside of an artery is typically much greater than the blood pressure inside of the other two blood vessels. Now, veins typically carry blood to the heart. So, again, anytime blood gets pumped out of the heart, there's going to be blood that flows back to the heart, and that's typically veins. Veins, again, usually contain oxygen poor blood. So the oxygen content is fairly low. Again, there is an exception to that, which we'll get into, but for the most part, they do carry that. Your veins, the pressure inside is typically much less than it would be in an artery. And one of the big reasons why that is because inside of your veins, there are little valves that kind of open and close that kind of regulate how quickly the blood flows back into your heart. I mean, think about that. If blood is flowing back into your heart at a very high rate, then that could cause too much blood to come into your heart. And then finally, the last one is capillaries. Capillaries are small blood vessels. That's where all our gas and nutrient exchange takes place. But again, we'll kind of get in more into that when we get into the heart. All right, finally, the last thing I wanted to go through with you is just a couple of terms. They're called pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation is basically blood that is flowing to the lungs and back to the heart. So when you think of the word pulmonary, think lungs. Systemic circulation is when blood leaves the heart and goes to everywhere else in the body. Your arms, your legs, your liver, your brain, wherever. Okay. So pulmonary to the lungs and back, and then systemic is to the body and back, the rest of the body. Okay. So make sure we understand what those two terms mean, and that will make a lot more sense. It'll probably make a little bit more sense when we get into the heart and the anatomy of the heart on the next couple of days. All right, guys, that's it for the notes for today. Have a good day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.